guys, it's Amanda and welcome back to my channel and welcome to 2023. This is the first video of 2023. It's the new year. It's going to be an amazing year. I declare that 2023 will be a new era of me. I literally thought of that saying this morning. So I cannot believe it's a new year already. It seems like 2022 just started and now it's over a year later and some stuff has happened. So today's video, I'm going to be sharing all of my reading statistics and all the books that I read in 2022. So let's get right into it. I have all of my notes right here. This is gonna be a long video because we read a lot of books. 2022, a year in books. My reading goal for this year was to read 30 books. In total, I read 33 books. Now let me bring up my GoodReads to get you some of the statistics that are on there. 2022, a year in books. I read 33 books. The amount of pages I read were 11,792. The shortest book I read was House Taken Over, which was only 9 pages. The longest book I read this year was Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer, which was 658 pages. So my average book length is 357. My most shelved book that I read this year was To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. And the least shelved book I read this year was House Taken Over. My average rating that I gave all the books I read this year was about a 3.9. My highest rated book, and also the highest rated book on GoodReads, is The Lost Spells. And my first review of the year, because I just recently started writing in some reviews on the actual GoodReads app. I never used to do that, so I started to do that this year. So my first review of the year was of The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, and I wrote, best book I've ever read, full reading vlog and in-depth review will be on my booktube channel. So now let's get into all the books that I read in 2022, my full review on every single one of them. My first book that I read in 2022 was Homebody by Rupi Kaur. I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. This is a poetry collection and I really did enjoy it. I read it within a day because again, it is a poetry collection so you can read that very fast. It has poetry of self-love, women's rights, all different types of stuff. There are some trigger warnings in there, so definitely do look that up beforehand. Overall, I really did like this book of poetry. I always love to read a little book of poetry every so often in between reads, and I really needed that. And it was a great way to start off the 2022 reading year. The next book I read was Conceal, Don't Feel by Jen Kalanita. This is a part of the Disney retelling series, which I absolutely love. This series is like twisted tales of our original Disney classics. You know me, I love Disney so much and I love Frozen so much, so I knew I would really like this book. So I gave this book a 4 out of 5. I gave it a 4 out of 5 because yes, it was a good atmospheric Frozen-esque read, but I did think that the twist on it wasn't that well done. So the twist is, what if Anna and Elsa never knew each other? It was a big story on that on itself, but I felt like not enough happened for it to be like a really mind-blowing twist. I did enjoy it though, so I did give it a 4 out of 5 stars, but the reason I took the star off was because I didn't think the twist was big enough and I didn't think it was done well, if that makes sense. But if you love Frozen, if you love Disney retellings, you will definitely love this book. The next book I read, I think is one of my, top 3 favorite books I've read this year, and I'll get to that at the end of the video, but book that I read next was The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. Like I said before, I had an entire reading vlog dedicated to this book. I loved it so very much. I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. I cried, I laughed, I loved it. Oh my god. So this book is about a woman who makes a deal with the devil to live forever, but the only catch is that every person she ever meets in her entire lifetime, they will never remember her until one man does. Oh, I love it. It's set in New York City. Most of the book is set in New York City in a bookstore. The man that remembers Addie is the worker of the bookstore and he has a cat, and New York City, oh my god. I loved this book so much. There is different timelines within the book. We jump from her time in, I think in the 1800s, I don't remember, but it's her time when she was originally born in the 1800s and then till now to 2014. So we do jump around in timelines a bit, but it is, what I like about it is easy to understand, and it specifically tells you when we're in 18 something and we're in 2000 something. So I did like that. But I really loved this book. The writing in it was gorgeous. The imagery, the romance, the characters, New York City. I loved this book. 5 to 5 stars. The next book I read was actually a short story collection, and that is Beasts and Beauties, Dangerous Tales. So this is a book of short stories, and they're all twisted tales of our original fairy tales that we all know and love. So I really did enjoy this. My original thought was I was going to give it a 3 out of 5 stars because the stories, some stories in there were really good. Some of them weren't that great. Like, I don't remember half of them, but the ones I do remember were the really good ones. And I loved the Beauty and the Beast one. I loved it, but then I didn't like it. It was like a very weird book, but also a really cool book at the same time because there is many different illustrations and paintings in this book. So I do like the imagery in the book. Some of the tales were a little weird, which I guess that is the point, but I didn't like it. Like, there's a weird where I like, but then there's a weird where it's like, what? I was originally going to give this a 3 out of 5 stars, but the last story did it all for me. It was a Peter Pan retelling, and you guys know how much I love Peter Pan retellings, and the last story like broke me. So that's when I gave it a 4 to 5 stars. So, like I said, it is a story of short stories, and it is all twisted tales of the fairy tales that we all know and love. 4 to 5 stars. Next book I read was Legendary by Stephanie Garber. Now, back in 2021, I read the first Caraval in the Caraval series. So in 2022, I wanted to finish off the series. So I read Legendary, which is the second book in the Caraval series. And in the Caraval series, we are following two sisters, Scarlett and Tella, and there's this circus that comes to town like every year, and it's called Caraval. And if you get a ticket to come to Caraval, then you actually are a part of the experience. Like, you're a part of the show, the circus show, and it's so much more than just a circus. It is an entire world, and it's gorgeous, and I think this was one of the most magical books I've ever read. There's like so many magical things that are happening. The imagery that is told in it is gorgeous. I really loved it. In the very first Caraval, Scarlett and Tella get tickets to go to Caraval, but the only catch is the game of this year's Caraval is to find Tella. So Tella goes missing. Scarlett is trying to find her sister to win the game of Caraval, and it goes on from there. There's pirates, which was a very nice surprise for me. It's kind of like a piratey story too, because there is some pirates, and like you're on an island with the sea, and it's just a really, really magical book, and I really, really enjoyed it. So the second book, again, I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. I love the entire series, and it was just so magical and so beautiful to read about. Next book I read was Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. I love Harry Potter. So I haven't read all the books in order from start to finish before. So that is my main goal for 2023. I'm gonna read all the Harry Potter books. So in 2022, I read Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, and that is the second book in the Harry Potter series. I gave that a 4 out of 5 stars. I don't think I have to say anything more. I love the Harry Potter series. I love the magic that's in it. I love like the characters in it, and just, I don't know what it is. It's just Harry Potter magic. And I feel like if you're a Harry Potter fan, you know what I'm talking about. I want to continue reading the series, so I gave Chamber of Secrets a 4 to 5. It wasn't best, but it was still Harry Potter, and I still loved it, so I gave it a 4 to 5 stars. Next book I read was Finale, which is the very last book in the Caraval series. Again, I gave that a 5 to 5 stars. Best series ever, and it's a really good trilogy to binge read, and it was really great, so I gave that 5 out of 5 stars. Next book I read, this is finally a book that I hated this year. The next book I read was Hooked by Emily McIntyre. I don't care. I don't even care that I'm saying her name wrong, because I hated this book. I don't care. I don't even know where to start with this. I hated this book so very much. It is a Peter Pan retelling, but not a good one. Started reading it, and I thought I was gonna like it, but then 5 pages in, I realized it's in present day, like the 21st century. And I was like, And it just continued to get worse and worse from there. It was bad, it was horrible, it was like just gross and disturbing too, and horrible. If you want to hear my entire thoughts on that, I did make another reading vlog on that, so I'll leave that up above. I didn't even finish it because I couldn't take the horrendousness that it was. So I gave this a 1 out of 5 stars. Next up, I read Anne of Green Gables by Ellen Montgomery. I read this on audiobook. I do have a physical copy, but I read it on audiobook. I really liked it. I've been wanting to slowly make my way through classics, and I read Anne of Green Gables because I knew I always would love Anne of Green Gables, and I loved it. I really did like it. It's just a nice, cute, spring-esque book. Like, I read it in the spring, so that's why I associate it with springtime. But there is pretty elements and the imagery of it, and just, I really connected with Anne a lot too, like just loving all of the small things in life and the adventure, basically like the wanderlust she has too. I just loved it so much, so I gave that a 4 to 5 stars. Next up, I read my next favorite trilogy of the year, and that is A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. V.E. Schwab is my new favorite author because I love her work so very much, and everything I've read by her, I've given a 5 out of 5 stars. So in A Darker Shade of Magic, there is 4 different types of Londons. Basically, like, the entire world is each 4 of the Londons. So there is Black London, Grey London, and White London. I have the poster right over there, so I'm checking to see if I got all of them right. So yeah, there's 4 different Londons, and there's these type of magicians that there's only a certain amount of people that can travel between each of the Londons. There's a bunch of just magic. There's some games, like tournaments going on with the magic, and it goes far deeper than that. This whole series, again, had some piratey notes of it, which I didn't even realize, and I really did enjoy it. It was magical, it was angsty, I loved it, and the characters in it were just so lovable, and honestly, when I finished it, I cried. I cried when I finished the whole series, and I just really liked it, and I really enjoyed it. And again, V.E. Schwab, I love her writing so much, and I just know that book, the entire book series, was just pure amazingness. So 5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was just a funny little book to read, and that is The Merry Rise of Skywalker. So someone just decided to make Star Wars into Shakespeare. I read the final Star Wars Rise of Skywalker in Shakespearean ways. It's literally a play, and it's all of Star Wars, but it's written as if it was Shakespeare. So it is the coolest thing. It is funny, and there's illustrations throughout the book, and it's just so cute. And the fact that it combines Star Wars and Shakespeare and puts it into one, it's like immaculate. I can't even express. So they actually do have the entire Star Wars series in Shakespeare. So I just read the last one, and it was amazing, and it was hilarious, and I loved reading it. I would read it out loud with my father, and because my father and I are big Star Wars fans, so we would just read it out aloud, and it was hilarious to read. So I gave that a 4 to 5 stars. The next book I read was a book I had to read for school, and that is To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. I think this is like required reading throughout all schools, but it really should be required reading. It was very informative, and it was a really nice and touching story. It's a classic, and I can see why it is a classic. So I did read this, and I wrote a paper on it and an entire semester of school on this book, and after a while I did start to like it more as I worked with it. That usually happens with me. With books that I have to read for school, I usually don't like them, but as I start to work with them more and write essays and a book analysis on them, I like them more, which makes no sense. But so I gave To Kill a Mockingbird a 3 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was The Lost Spells. I don't even know how to describe this book, but it's poetry, it's gorgeous, and it's just a really pretty book. There's illustrations throughout the entire thing, and it's basically just all poetry about nature and living things in nature. It was so beautifully written, and sometimes you didn't even know what you were reading about, and it was just gorgeous. So I gave this a 4 to 5 stars. I, again, read it within a sitting. It is just a cute, beautiful book that you can just read, and it is gorgeous. The next book I read was the second book in the A Darker Shade of Magic series, which is A Gathering of Shadows, and I gave that a 5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was actually a witchcraft book, which I'm very happy about, and that is The Modern Guide to Witchcraft. Your Complete Guide to Witches, Covens, and Spells. I really wanted to get more into witchcraft this year, which I have been. I'm really enjoying my journey with it. So this is the first like informative book about witchcraft that I read, among others. And I dog-eared the pages. I put, what are they called? Page markers in it. I highlighted the hell out of the book. I loved it, and I took a lot of notes on it, and it was just a really fun read. I gave that a 5 out of 5 stars. Next up is another poetry collection, and that is Bronte Poems by Emily Bronte. I love poetry. This is Emily Bronte's complete collection of poems, and I just love poetry. So I gave this a 4 to 5 stars. Next up, I read the final book in the A Darker Shade of Magic series, and that is Conjuring of Light, and I gave that a 5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read, I was really disappointed by, and that is The Shadow in the Glass by J.J.A. Harwood. This was, I just think it was marketed weird. On it, it says it is a gothic Cinderella retelling, and there wasn't a lot of Cinderella-esque parts in it. It was just weird. It was a good book. Like, the story was fine. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. It wasn't the best thing I've ever read, but I didn't hate it. I just think it was marketed weird. It was gothic. It was Victorian Gothicness. I was expecting a lot more Cinderella notes to it, and there wasn't a lot. So I think it was just marketed weird. It was getting a lot of hype when it came out, but yeah, I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. Next up, I read Dracul by J.D. Barker and Dacre Stoker. This is, I think, one of the best books I've read this year too. I loved it. I don't even know. It's about Bram Stoker's life and how he came to write Dracula, but it is also the story of Dracula mixed in with Bram Stoker's life, and it is just amazing. It's dark, it's gothic, there's blood, there's vampires, there's grave digging, there's a lot, and it's creepy, it is scary, and I loved it. Like I said, it is like the story of Bram Stoker's life. It is also the story of how he basically came to know Dracula himself. That's how he got the inspiration to write Dracula. So this book makes you question what is real and what is not. So this book is literally saying that vampires are real, and that is how Bram Stoker wrote Dracula, because he was actually in cohorts with Dracula himself. That's all I gotta say. The next book I read is actually a reread, and that is Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer. This is the kind of prequel / retelling of Twilight. So this is the original story of Twilight told in Edward Cullen's point of view. I read this right when it came out back in 2020, so I wanted to reread it, and I gave it another 5 out of 5 stars. I loved it. I love Edward Cullen so very much. I love Twilight so much. This book I love with all of my dearest heart. So 5 out of 5 stars. I love me some Edward Cullen. Team Edward. Yeah. The next book I read, I think it was another disappointment for this year, and that is Practical Magic by Alice Hoffman. I was really expecting to really like this book because it's witches and it's very popular, and the movie is very popular, and I just thought I was really gonna like it, but I didn't really. I haven't watched the movie yet. Maybe I'll actually like the movie more, which is unheard of for me. Yeah, I was very disappointed by it. I did DNF it because it wasn't like, nothing was really happening for me, and like it was boring at some parts, and there was like some disturbing parts in it. There is a lot of mention of SA, like gross things like that, so definitely check the trigger warnings if you're going to read this, but I had to stop reading it because of that. I just couldn't handle it, and I just didn't like reading about it, so I gave this a 2 out of 5 stars. Again, very disappointing. I thought I was really going to like it. Next up, I read a short story for school, and that is The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe. I love Edgar Allan Poe so very much, and in the beginning of the school year we actually had an entire Poe unit, which I was so happy for. So we read a bunch of his short stories and we wrote papers on them, and it was amazing. So I read Fall of the House of Usher, and I gave that a 3 out of 5 stars. It wasn't the best of Poe's work, I believe, but it was still good, and I still love to read about Poe, obviously. The next was another short story, and that is House Taken Over. This is a very, very short story. It's only like a 9-page long thing. It was like odd. It was more of an interpretive piece. The monster, the unseen force, it was like up to your imagination and up to your vision of it. So I didn't think it was that scary. It is a horror short story, but if it was anything, it was just weird. But it wasn't the best thing I've ever read, so I gave that a 2 out of 5 stars. I also read that for school for the short story unit we were doing. Next book I think is my last like favorite book of the year, and that is A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. Oh, I cannot wait to finish this series. I haven't yet. This is the All Souls trilogy. I said this before, but this is like Twilight on steroids, and I love it. It is about a witch and a vampire falling in love, and magic, demons, magic. I loved it, and I cannot wait to finish the series. I only read the first book, so I have 2 more books to go in the series, and I cannot wait to start watching the TV show because they made a TV show out of it, and I'm so excited to do that this year. So I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. Twilight on steroids. The next book I read was another witchcraft book, and that is The Witch's Way, A Guide to Modern Day Spellcraft, Nature Magic, and Divination. Again, I marked up this entire book. I wrote down stuff in it. I wrote down the spells, some of the spells that are in it, and I really love to read about like modern day witchcraft and witchcraft in general, and I really did enjoy it, so I gave that a 4 to 5 stars. The next book I read was Long Live the Pumpkin Queen. Oh my gosh. This takes place right after the Nightmare Before Christmas movie ends. This was getting a lot of hype. This just came out this year in 2022, and I read it during October, during spooky season, and it was really good. It wasn't the best thing I've ever read. It was like a young adult book. I felt while reading it, it fell on the like really younger side of young adult. So that's why I didn't like bond with it a lot. But I gave it a 3 to 5 stars. I loved The Nightmare Before Christmas, so I loved the book. It was just a nice, cute comfort read to read during spooky season. The next book I read was A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. This was dark, it was bloody, and it was great. This is a story about Dracula's wife, and told by her perspective. Ooh, it was just a lot. It was dark. There was a lot of trigger warnings. There was a lot of stuff that was hard to read, but ooh, it's basically how, another thing about this book is that you don't know who this person is. You assume it's Dracula, but it's never actually said that it is him, because throughout the story, the girl is just saying him and he, and they never say his name. So that is another reason I really liked it. With the horror aspect, you don't know who this person is. It does say, like, in the dust jacket, it is Dracula. Throughout the story, you don't know anything. And through the story, what else I loved about it is that it is in journal form. It's as if she's writing to Dracula himself in this journal. It was really great. Really, really great, and I gave that a 4 out of 5 stars. We're getting to the end here, I promise, guys. The next book I read was another book I had to read for school, and that is The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. This is kind of a short story. I mean, it's a 200-page book. It's a short story, kinda. I had to read it for school. I wrote a whole paper on it. I did not enjoy this really at all. It is about a man who one day turns into a beetle, and this man is more focused on getting to work than focused on, oh my god, I just turned into a beetle. So it is like a whole like allegory on society and how overworking yourself is such a dangerous thing. There was just a lot. It was like the entire book was like a whole metaphor. So again, a school-based thing, so I gave that a 1 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was a very surprising read for me, and that is a romance novel called Up All Night with a Good Duke. I found this in the airport. I didn't expect to find it. I found it in the airport, I bought it, and I loved it. I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. I really, really enjoyed it. It's dark academia, it's gothic, and it's romance, and our main character, Artemis, she is a writer, so she is writing under a pen name, and no one knows that she's this famous gothic writer, and then she meets a man and they fall in love, and it's a whole like angsty Victorian romance, and it was really, really great, and I did not expect it to be that great, but it was that great. So I gave that a 5 out of 5 stars. Next, I read The Picture of Dorian Gray. Again, I was working my way through the classics, and I finally read A Picture of Dorian Gray. I knew I would love this book from the very first time I ever heard of it. It is a gothic tale and about a man who gets his picture painted. He mutters something under his breath, and it is a wish that the painting will age and he can stay young and beautiful forever. With each sin he makes, he becomes more and more beautiful and more young, and all of the sins that he does make, that goes upon to the picture of Dorian Gray, and it is so amazing. Oscar Wilde, love it. Oh my god, his writing was perfect, gothic, Victorian, amazing. The movie I really like. He was really pretty in the movie. I gave the book a 4 to 5 stars. And finally, the last book of 2022 I read was A Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. This book, I can't even describe it, but I loved this book with all of my heart. It is a story of stories. People have said that it's a very confusing book, but it is, but you're reading it and we have one main story, one main character, Zachary Ezra Rollins, and we're following him throughout the story because he finds a book and he opens it and he realizes that this book is his book and it's a story written from his childhood. So throughout the whole book, we are focusing on Zachary and all the different stories that are in this book that he finds. Throughout it, sometimes you're like, what's happening? You don't know what's happening, but it all makes sense by the end of the book. Oh my gosh. This book, it is like an entire story full of stories, and by the end of it, everything connects. Everything makes sense, and it is just a beautiful story. I loved this with all of my heart. It is a story of stories and storytelling and the love of books and the love of writing stories. And I want this quote tattooed on me because I love it so much. And I literally made it my phone background too. And when I read this quote from the Starless Sea, I just like had to like put the book down and just sit there and be like, whew. So that is, no story ever truly ends as long as it is told. I loved this book. I want them to make a movie out of it. I want everything. This book was gorgeous. Seriously, the most beautiful thing I've ever read, and I love it to death. 5 out of 5 stars. Oh my god. Read this book. Wow. Oh, it's almost an hour later. That is all the books I read in 2022. A total of 33 books. I think my top 3 favorite books of the year were The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, A Discovery of Witches, and A Starless Sea. Those are my 3 favorite books of the year. I had a really great reading year this year. I had a lot of 5 stars, and I'm very happy. Got a lot of good books this year, and I'm very proud, and I'm very happy that I got to share them all with you. That is all the books I read. If you have read any of these books or plan to read any of these books, please let me know. Comment that down below. And yeah. It's 2023. We have new reading goals this year. I'm gonna make another video of my 2023 TBR, and it's gonna be great. That is going to be the end of today's video. If you enjoyed, please hit the like button, hit subscribe if you have not already, and click the notification bell so you'll be notified every single time that I upload. And if you want to find me anywhere else, you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, GoodReads, Pinterest, and in between the pages of a book. And as always, remember to be the Captain Jack Sparrow of your story, and may your compass lead you to amazing things. And that's just you guys in my next video. Happy New Year and happy 2023.